Hello Blood Bowl fans and welcome to another Race Wars. This time we are looking at the Dark Elves. Personally my favourite of the elf category, though maybe not the strongest. I think that's why I like them actually, because they are a little bit more challenging but they're slightly more suited to dealing with more things than throwing the ball about, at least. So what do Cyanide say about the Dark Elves then? Oh, before I say that actually, this is also one of the teams that is kind of recommended to new players when they say they are interested in the running throwing game. Dark Elves are usually recommended as the dash option, just because they are less likely to suffer from from a small mistake. Of course, every team suffers from a big mistake, but a relatively small mistake you can get away with when playing as this team. You can recover a lot quicker than with other teams. So what does Cyanide say about the Dark Elves? They have many exotic and interesting positionals. Funnily enough, at the moment they have the only female player, the Witch Elf, which is kind of a sucky thing from Cyanide, I think. We could have done with some more females, especially keeping the War Dancers as female, but that's kind of an aside, and it's obviously something that people don't usually want to hear about games, but still, it's an important point. And other than that though, they do definitely have exotic and interesting positionals. The Witch Elves particularly are really interesting the way they're designed. They have a lot of interesting skills and they can do some very annoying things. The Assassins are very specific for the game. There's no other piece like it, so that is also interesting. And even the Runner is built to be something to look at and think, huh, that's interesting. So I would agree with this entirely. It is a roster where you're kind of looking at it and you're thinking, what does this button do? You get kind of that feeling when you're first making a Dark Elf team. Great defensive race because of their mobility and skills. Yeah, this is true. It takes a little bit of time to get used to the way that they defend and get used to the way they attack as well, for that matter. Though, yes, once you've developed your basic skills playing as Dark Elves, they are definitely one of the stronger defending teams. Just because they can reposition in a way that's really annoying for their opposition. And any player can save the game by pressing Ctrl C. Oh no, wait, no, that's not what it says. Just any player can save the game, yes. Like I said, and like a lot of experienced Blood Bowl players say, that if you do make a mistake, you're more likely to be able to recover with Dark Elves, and this is why, because yes, any piece can pick up the ball in the game, realistically, and any piece can kind of block down whatever's using the ball, so long as they have a bit of support, and the ball carrier doesn't have too much support. Not well equipped to play against bashy teams. Compared to many races, this is true, especially because the Witch Elves, the Runner, and I think the Assassin has armor value 7, which means that they are going to get hurt a lot quicker. But the rest of the pieces do have armor value 8, they just don't really have the skill set to hold up against a strong bashy team. So you are best off avoiding a fight, apart from against certain races. They can probably stand toe-to-toe with their opposition race, the High Elves for example, though it's not really advisable. They can probably outpunch the Wood Elves, and they can roughly match Skaven punch for punch, though I think they're slightly weaker than Skaven. But there is that. Any other team though, and yeah, you really shouldn't be in a long, drawn-out fight with them. The most useful players are expensive and fragile. The Witch Elves are very expensive actually, and they only have armor value 8. The Assassins are also very expensive, and very much a niche option. A lot of serious coaches wouldn't take an Assassin, though they are a lot of fun, and they're very good against armor value 7 pieces, or lower. But again, very expensive, and just armor value 7, and very likely to get fouled, to be honest. And they don't have the skills to use a simply brutal playstyle. No, they don't. You have to learn to run with them. You don't have much of a choice. So, a bit of fluff then. Evil beyond belief, skilled without doubt, the Dark Elves take to the pitch to show the world their superiority. Dark Elf teams prefer a malevolent and spiteful running game over the passing of their godly cousins. That's a good point. There's no thrower or runner in the Dark Elf team, so you do basically rely on moving the ball as opposed to throwing the ball. Backed up by the ruthless Witch Elves and dangerous Assassins, the Dark Elf team has all the tools to power through rather than around an opponent's line. That's an important point. Dark Elves' basic strategy is to punch a hole and go through it. The hole can be on the flank, of course, in that case they do go around. But that's what Dark Elves do, basically. They make a hole, and they send their ball and support through that hole. That's the basic strategy. I'm using the wrong shield. Let's fix that immediately. Sorry. It's a good thing I check this sometimes, actually. And sorry, this will take a second. Probably could have cut, but I'd rather do this in one take as opposed to doing it in two, because when I do it in two, that always means... Oops. When I do it in two, that always means that I have to spend twice as long rendering it, so... There we go. Sorry about that. Moving on then, let's have a look at a team, let's build a team. So... let's call them... the Cauldron... Conspirators. Yeah, that's not likely to have been taken. And just going through some of the symbols that we have here, which is partly why I do this, by the way. I don't spend this long doing it for no particular reason. Well, let's go with that one. I've never used that one before. I'm just going through the colour scheme very quickly. May start doing this a bit more actually, just so you can see what you can do with the team. I quite like that one. Never seen it. Let's have a look at it. And we are here. Hooray for creativity. Okay, so having a look at the pieces. Yeah, I like this color scheme. It's weird, but it's awesome. Right, let's start with the basic piece for a change. Let's change it up a bit. So, the lineman, the nice boring guy. Again, like High Elves, not really there to get punched, but is definitely there to stand in the way. Also, like High Elves, it is actually a legitimate build to take 11 linemen. It's basically the same team, so you can do that if you're boring, though it requires a little bit of experience. And again, the reason why people do this is to buy positionals later on when pieces die as replacements, and you already have a relatively skilled up team with block and dodge ready to go. That's basically the idea, I think, of taking the 11-man lineman roster. And again, they've got general and agility access like the High Elf Brethren, so they can get block and dodge in their first couple of skill ups, and that's basically all they need. You can give them other things beyond that, you can give them different skill sets, but they don't really need anything beyond that, to be honest. They have average movement of 6, they have average strength of 3, they have slightly above average agility of 4, so they can pick up, they can pass, they can catch, and they have armor value 8. So that's the lineman, mostly there to hold the line and to create a screen. Also used in support when trying to punch the hole and protecting the ball whenever they can. Let's do them in order. Next up then we have the runner. They have the same heads, I believe. Yeah, they do. There you go, let's keep that one. So the runner. The runner is the closest thing to a thrower in the team, though he's not really designed for throwing. He does have the skill Dump Off though, which I think is new. And this skill allows the player to make a quick pass when an opponent declares that he will throw a block at him. So the important thing is that the runner has to decide whether to move the ball before the block dice are rolled. So there are times when you decide to use Dump Off and then your opponent rolls a skull, so you've passed the ball, but the runner's still standing. Though it is a way of getting a little bit out of trouble against the opposition at times, especially if you have quite a few pieces causing you problems. They have general agility and passing skill, so if you want to throw in the team, you can build the runner to do that. Though again, he still needs block and dodge realistically, so it's going to be level 4 before you start really thinking about making him a passing piece. He has movement allowance 7, which is slightly above average, so he is the designated ball carrier. He has strength 3, he has agility 4, which is of course above average, and he has armor value 7, which is slightly below average, so you need to keep him as safe as possible and try and stop him from getting blocked. I really wish they'd show you a colour scheme when you're doing this, but never mind. Then the assassin. Only the one face, I believe. Yeah, I don't use assassins very often. Kind of looks like he's from the Assassin's Creed game, but the emo style. And the assassin's job basically is to knock out things with low armor value for free, because he has this fantastic skill. Well, I say fantastic, this very niche, but can be fantastic skill, Stab. This is basically a free block that does an automatic injury to the opposition when it succeeds. You have to roll a dice to make sure it does succeed. And the dice is based on the armor value that they are stabbing, with no tackle zones affecting it. So it's basically a free block. If it fails or if it succeeds, then nothing changes. The turn continues. However, if it does fail, you don't get a turnover. If it does succeed, you get an automatic injury roll. So it goes straight through armor, basically. They have general and agility access, and again, you're probably giving them block and dodge. You can also make an argument for block and dodge. That's all you need to give them, really, and then it's a pretty solid piece. Though it's, again, something that you only really need against, for example, a skink. There's no other reason to take one, to be honest. And they have shadowing, which means that when something tries to dodge out of the way, you can roll a dice, and if the dice is successful, you follow the dodging piece. And shadow can be a really big problem, especially for agility teams, because they have to roll the dice every single time you succeed shadow. So every time they dodge, you take a bit of risk as well, and you force them to decide whether to dodge again or not. The issue with shadowing is that you can shadow a piece into a place where you really don't want to be as an assassin, but most of the time that's a worthwhile sacrifice, to be honest. Assassins are also very difficult to level because the stab, when it works, it doesn't give you SPP, so you need MVPs, or you need to take blocks in order to get that SPP. They have movement 6, which is average, strength 3, which is average, agility 4, which is slightly above. They can still do everything with the ball, and armor value 7, which means that Assassin is going to get blocked every time he's standing there next to the Croxagore he tried to stab. And there's a good chance the Croxagore is going to kill him. Just keep that in mind when using an Assassin. Next up we have a Blitzer, and you can have 4 of these in the team. That's something I haven't been saying. You can have 2 Assassins, you can have 2 Runners, and you can have 4 Blitzers, and same faces as the other 2 pieces. The Blitzer is one of the stars of the team. Like in most teams with a Blitzer, they're usually a very useful piece. Though this Blitzer does not have strength access, which is rather annoying. He only has general and agility, so next level up is probably dodge to give you blodge, and then you're taking different things based on what you want the Blitzer to do. He has movement 7, strength 3, agility 4, and armor value 8, so average, average, above average, above average. And that's it for the Blitzer. You can take up to 4 of them. Their main job is to punch the hole that we're talking about, and then follow through and make sure the pieces, if they want to block, they're trying to block him as opposed to something else, and they want to blitz him. Well, you want the opposition to be blitzing you only. You don't really want to be giving the opposition free blocks ever as Dark Elves, if possible. And then we have the Witch Elf. You can have up to 2 on the team, though most people would recommend just the 1. She has some very useful skills that make her quite a dangerous piece. She's the best piece in the team, arguably, though she also has some weaknesses that mean it's quite difficult to keep her alive. So, there's the Witch Elf. She has movement allowance 7, which is slightly above average, strength 3, which is average, agility 4, which again gives her a chance to do things with the ball, and armor value 7, which is slightly below average. She has general and agility access. She already has dodge, but she does need block. And there are a few other skills that can really help her. Most people make a strip piece with the... It sounds even worse talking about a Witch Elf. The strip ball piece as a Dark Elf, and often a ball carrier potentially, and a murderer. They're the kind of things that people tend to make with a Witch Elf. And she has Frenzy, which we've talked about already, so you have to be careful what you're doing with it. It does mean that she has a good chance to serve people off the pitch, which is a really realistic tactic with Dark Elves because of their maneuverability, but it also means that she can get into trouble throwing that second block, of course. She has dodge, which we talked about, and she has a fantastic skill, jump up. The player stand up for free without paying the free squares of movement. The player may also declare a block action while prone, which requires an agility roll with a 2+ modifier to see if he can complete the action. So you need to roll a dice, 2+, then she stands up as normal, and she can react as normal, and if she rolls a 1, then she stays on the floor. But if she does stand up, then it means that she can move her normal movement allowance, which can be very useful both defensively and offensively. You can put her into a position where you can give her the ball, and you can put her into a position where she can threaten the opposition ball. Okay, in terms of build, first build is the all lineman build again, so let's do that first. With the all lineman build, you can have 3 rerolls, and an apothecary, which is pretty good. And when you're building this team, basically you have to obviously choose somebody as a ball carrier, but everybody can be a ball carrier. The main benefit of an all lineman team is that your opponent doesn't really know what you're going to do, because they can't see what piece does what. So it does mean that you can be completely adaptable. I didn't say this about high elves, but it's true as well. And the main downside of the all lineman team is that you have all linemen, so you have no skills. So that's the one setup. Following on from that, you can take a second regular setup, which is all of those and the runner, so you do have a designated ball carrier, though in this setup everybody's going to tackle this piece here, the target this piece here, sorry. Another option, we'll keep the runner for now actually. Well, you can take lineman and blitzer in the same way. You can maybe even afford both blitzers. No, you can't afford both blitzers. Without an apothecary maybe. Let me just check. There are 4 blitzers in the team potentially, sorry. But if we... No, the blitzer 100. Okay, so same way you could go 100 with the blitzer. So another regular starting setup. I think the strongest starting setup, but the slightly riskiest starting setup, second riskiest, let's say, is all 4 blitzers and the rest linemen. You don't get an apothecary, you only get 2 rerolls in this situation. You can also drop a blitzer. Maybe drop 2, I can't remember, I haven't played Dark Elves in a while. Oh no, you can drop 1 blitzer and take a witch elf instead, with 2 rerolls as well. So they're your options basically. You can have all linemen with runner, you can have all blitzers, all linemen, or you can have 3 blitzers, witch elf, and linemen, giving up a reroll for the last 2 options. You can also take a bench if you really want to, with the all linemen or with the runner lineman setup, though it's better to take the apothecary if you're going to go that route. It's the safest route to start off. So that's your build. And if we just take each of the pieces just so we can have a look at a team when it's developed a bit. So obviously do not do this as a starting roster, but I want them all in front of me. There's an assassin. And there's a runner. So again, this is not a starting roster. Do not do this with the 1 reroll. 1 reroll is a no-no. But in terms of building your team then, so everything wants dodge, everything wants block. You want a kick piece in a Dark Elf team definitely, just to give you that little bit extra chance to steal the ball on offense and to force slow teams to go chasing the ball when you set up to potentially steal it afterwards. You want the assassin. You don't really care about leveling. To be honest, if an assassin levels, it can be a problem. It's better off just getting rid of the assassin every time it levels, because it's basically an expensive piece when it starts to level that doesn't really do anything but its original role. So there's debate over this, of course, though my personal thing would be, if I have an assassin that's leveled, there's a good chance that I'm doing what we call recycling, which means I'm getting rid of him and buying a fresh piece if I can afford him, if he's leveled, especially if he's rolled a double or something crazy like that. If he's rolled a stat, I might keep him just because it makes him a different piece, but it's a waste of TV if you ask me. The runner, if I'm going to take a runner personally, I'm going to develop him as a thrower long term. He's going to take block and dodge first, then he's going to take pass, maybe accurate, maybe safe throw, just to keep the ball, just to keep that ball distribution threat going the whole time. The Witch Elf has 2 basic builds. You can build a stripper, which means that you give her wrestle instead of block, you give her strip ball, and you do everything you can to take the ball from the opposition using her. If you can get the piece off the pitch at the same time, then even better. She's a very good strip ball piece, actually. The other option is you can make her a hunter-killer, giving her block, giving her some skills that help her run further, things like sure feet or sprint, and giving her things that cause more damage, like tackle, etc., so she can get those little dodgy gits who try to run through. And the blitzers, basically you want to build them with block, dodge, tackle, so they can put most things down. You can make them a second frenzy piece if you really want to, though I would recommend only experienced coaches try this. And you can give them extra speed skills, agility skills, so they can do something with that. That's the basic team anyway. The linemen basically create a screen so that the opposition can't break through to get to the ball, or so that the opposition can't move forward to score. The assassin stands on the thing with the lowest armor value and tries to stab it to death. The runner keeps hold of the ball. The witch elf or witch elves, when you've developed a little bit potentially, basically just are there for crowd control and causing problems for the opposition, surfing when they can safely. Better to blitz, because if you blitz with a frenzy piece, then it can move after its frenzy to the end of the line. And the blitzers are there to punch the hole through the gap and support the other pieces that need support. So that's it for creating a Dark Elf team. In terms of the team I already have, I only really have the one, and it's only had the one game I believe, which they did win. Dark Elves I think I'm slightly better at than the other elves for some reason, though there's not much difference between Dark Elves and High Elves. I did go with the Witch Elf Free Blitzer all lineman build, and after the first game I bought the Apothecary, but I've had no levels yet. Though they did win their game. And I'm pretty sure that's all I have. It's just... Oh, one thing I can say very quickly, in next season's Steel, I'm actually running a Dark Elf team, and I think I've done the same setup. Yeah, I have. So, Season 7 of Steel will see me actually going through with a Dark Elf team so long as I get off the reserve list, which I'm currently on. So let's have a look at what Cyanide has done with a highly leveled Dark Elf team. So you can see there's quite a lot of dodge here, and there's quite a lot of block, so that's relatively common. They have given blitzers sidestep, which does give you the chance to move into positions where you want to be after they've been blocked. It is actually quite a useful skill in a blitzer, I forgot to mention that. What sidestep does is when you are blocked, you choose where you go, as opposed to your opponent, as long as the opponent doesn't have grab. Then we've gone just dodge on the lineman, and the assassin's been given leap, which is a really weird choice. I would not recommend that. One runner has been given accurate. If you are going to make him a distributor and have one safe piece, then your best option first is throw, or pass, sorry, pass is called, isn't it? Pass and then accurate. And maybe sure hands if you're feeling really like you need a lot of safety. And the Witch Elves block leap, which is a realistic choice. Leap isn't such a bad idea. It kind of makes them equivalent of a war dancer. And block sidestep. So this is the piece that is mostly going to be a problem piece and isn't going to get surfed. That's the one benefit of taking sidestep on Witch as well. If you have surfed somebody off the pitch, if you're stuck on that end zone, then you get to choose where you go when someone tries to block you, so you're less likely to be surfed. So sidestep is also a very useful skill on a Witch Elf. All in all, not a bad build for Dark Elves, just a bit too unsafe. I mean, they could have taken more block, they could have taken more dodge. It's lacking some safety in this team, but it does have a little bit of variety, at least. Can't think of words today for some reason, sorry, I'm struggling a bit with this video. So, in terms of race v race and the basic strategy, against humans, your advantage of course over humans is agility, your disadvantage is strength. So, what do? You do the same as you do with most teams as Dark Elves. You screen off when they are attacking you, just going one square back at a time and trying to pick off the catchers, trying to pick off the weaker pieces in the team. Just trying to slow down the opposition. If the humans make a mistake, or if you do manage to knock the ball out of their hands, then make sure you jump on that ball. You don't necessarily have to take it the turn you knock it down, but you do have to make sure that the humans aren't picking it up easily. So they have to roll a lot of dice in order to get it back. On offense, it's the same as it is with most teams as well. The Dark Elves are going to be trying to find a weak point and punch a hole through that weak point, sending the runner, the Witch Elves, the Blitzers, anything they can through to cause problems for the opposition. Like the High Elves, you don't want to be scoring too quickly, because if you do, then you're giving the opposition free blocks. The ideal game against a Bash team is 1-0 for any Elf team, because you don't take too many blocks. That is, you get to kick, you stop them from scoring, and then on your drive you score 1 on turn 16. That is the ideal game for an Elf team. Though a lot of people do try to do the multiple score tactic, and against humans you can play the I'm going to score 1 more than you game. That is an option, especially if the humans are playing aggressively. Against orcs, try and avoid the fight at all costs and leave your assassin on the bench if you have one, because the assassin is not going to help you here. Too much armor value to deal with, and too easy to get hurt. When you're playing with an assassin, basically you want to be playing against pieces that have armor value 7. And if the opposition team doesn't have armor value 7, then the assassin is doing the opposite of what you want a Dark Elf to do. They're standing on a piece and they're getting blocked. So, against humans and against orcs, drop the assassin. With orcs, basically you have to run away from them. If they're on you, then dodge out the way, but only one back if you're on defense, and try and make a hole through a blitzer or through a lineman, or through the thrower himself if you are on offense. Dwarves is a similar story. You want to get away, just remember that a lot of dwarves have tackle, so your witch elf is in trouble if she is based, because she can't have a reroll on a dodge. So keep that in mind. And also, the dwarves have a frenzy piece too, so frenzy has to counteract frenzy potentially. And again, don't bring the assassin, he's a waste of a piece in this setup. Against Skaven, it usually comes down to who has the most armor breaks, to be honest, because both teams have similar tactics in that they want to punch a hole and run through it, or they want to pick off weaker pieces. So you're playing a very similar game, both on defense and on offense. But basically just try and keep them in one place, though it's almost impossible, and when you're on attack, try and break through them. They've got quite a lot of weak pieces you can punch. An assassin is not an awful idea with Skaven, because there's a lot of armor value 7. You can knock out a gutter, you can knock out a lineman. Though, if you're next to a storm vermin, or if you're next to rat ogre, or if you're next to the thrower, then you're in a bit of trouble. High Elf and Dark Elf is interesting, and it really depends on how the two teams are built. This game can go in many different ways. The basic strategy is still the same though, and you are basically playing the same game. The difference is though that the High Elves basically want to run around you and throw the ball through you, whereas you want to just punch a hole through the middle of their prissy faces. So you are playing a slightly different game, but you have pretty much the same chance of pulling it off, so you need to keep that in mind when you're playing a High Elf team. And basically locking down the thrower and catches wherever you can is a really helpful thing to do. And again, all armor value 8, so not worth taking the assassin. He's just going to be in the way. You can also stand on High Elves a little bit, but don't go crazy with it. So just stopping them from having the maneuverability and keeping yourself with maximum maneuverability is kind of a good idea. And the Witch Elves can really sort out their structured line. You can really make a mess of what they've decided to create with their pieces. And Bretonnians are kind of a similar story, but they're not trying to throw over you, and they are trying to go through you or around you in the same way, so you're still playing the exact same game as you were against High Elves, basically. Bretonnians are a strange team, and they are known for fouling, so keep that in mind with all of your low rank, low armor value pieces, your Witch Elf, your Runner, and your Assassin. The Assassin is not a bad idea though, because he can knock out a lineman if necessary, though you do have to surrender him to a lineman in the first place. Against Chaos, it depends if it's early development or late development. In early development you have all the skills, they have none of the skills, so you can kind of get around them, cause them problems that way, or go through them in the same way. When they've developed a bit, then they're a little bit more dangerous for your linemen and for your blitzers, so just keep that in mind and try not to get caught up in a fight with them no matter what their TV. Against Wood Elves, this is the one team that you can actually pick on, and that's the same, whoever Wood Elves are facing, they're trying to pick on them. It's a nice day to be a Wood Elf. Though the Wood Elves do have more speed and they're generally more annoying than you are in terms of the ball, so if you're trying to outrun them and trying to outball them, you're not going to work, you're not going to manage. However, if you are trying to outblock them, and if you're trying to beat them down for attrition while locking them up, that isn't such a bad strategy. The Assassin can also help because almost the entire Wood Elf team is armor value 7, if not the entire team. I think the entire team is actually. So the Assassin can do damage to literally everything on this team. So keep that in mind. I should say as well, an Assassin can stab a armor value 8, armor value 9, etc. piece, but it's much less likely. And the Lizardmen. The absolute team that wants to go skink hunting. That's exactly your job against lizards. Hunt down those skinks and kill the little lizards. Try and avoid the Saurus as much as possible, and try and avoid the Crocs as much as possible. If you really, really want to, you can try and sacrifice one piece of the Croc so it doesn't move, but I don't think it's necessary as Dark Elves. You don't really need the Saurus not to move, you just need to make sure they're moving to you, not through you. So if you're giving free blocks to Saurus, you're doing something wrong. If you're forcing one piece to blitz you, then that's the way you're playing properly, while doing your best to get rid of skinks. The Assassin can kill skinks, of course, but there's a good chance that when the Assassin does so, he's going to be standing on a Saurus afterwards, so keep that in mind. And Norse, again, a very armor 7 heavy team, but also a block heavy team. So you don't really want to be fighting them, though your Assassin can do a little bit of damage. Same basic strategy, stand off them by one square and try and punch a hole through them. Norse are quite squishy, so at least there is that. You do have the slight attritional advantage, though the block does make up for that a bit on the Norse side. Norse are going to be punching you with 1-die blocks, whereas you need a 2-die block, so keep that in mind and keep your team in groups of players as much as possible. Against Undead, it depends on the build of the team a little bit, but if it's a standard Undead team, then it's a bit of a tough matchup for Dark Elves, I think. The Wights and the Mummies can obviously cause you quite a lot of problems, and the Ghouls, if used in good combination with the Wights or Wights and Zombies, are quite difficult to put down as well, because the Ghoul is the only thing that's really something you can punch and do some damage to. You need to avoid the Zombies as much as possible. They're very slow, so make sure the Zombies have to move quite a lot. Make sure that you're trying to split up the Mummies. And in terms of the Wights, they're not such a bad idea for blitzing, just because if you get rid of one, you have a slight advantage over the opposition. Similar tactic though, stay back 1 or 2 squares from the opposition, though at the same time try and force zombies to move, so basically fall backwards diagonally as opposed to falling backwards in a straight line. If you fall backwards in a straight line, you have the exact same line to deal with next turn. If you try and force the zombies to split up, then you have more gaps that you can create with your pieces to run your runner through. And on offense, same idea, punch your way through a zombie, punch your way through a Wight, and get as far away from the mummies and the majority of the zombies as possible. Against Necromantic it's very similar, because they have a similar team build of course, that the wolves can cause you problems because that claw can eat through your blitzers and your linemen. You're more likely to take some injuries against Necromantic, so prepare for that. Though you can still mostly outrun them, the only pieces that can chase you down are the wolves. So do your best to focus down the wolves, do your best to avoid the zombies and flesh columns, and again with the Wights, if you can get a good block on a Wight, then take it. If you can knock that piece out, then you can have a slight advantage, though less so than against Undead. With Nurgle, I kind of think Dark Elf is the ultimate anti-Nurgle team, because Nurgle are built to stop people from taking blocks and to stop people from passing, and Dark Elves don't really do either of those two things. So all of the strengths that Nurgle generally has are kind of moot against the Dark Elf team. A little bit. Having said that though, definitely don't get stuck in a fight with them, and if you really have to pass, then make sure you do it as far away from disturbing presence as possible. Though same idea, stand off 1 square, 2 squares, and try and punch your way through on a fence. If you can knock out a Rotter, that's much better than trying to punch your way through a Chaos Warrior, though a Chaos Warrior if necessary. With Khemri, the Assassin can come back in handy, because quite a lot of armor value 7. I'm not recommending an Assassin, I've said him a lot obviously, but it's just, I'm trying to tell you how you can use him when you shouldn't use him. That's basically the point here. Khemri are also a team that really suffer if you can force them to move where they don't want to move, so the Witch Elves are really essential in this matchup. make sure that you're frenzying pieces diagonally so you can make bigger gaps, and do your best to dodge off the piece after you've done the frenzy move. Try and avoid the Tomb Guardians as much as possible and try and force them into at least 2 pairs. If you can force all 4 of them separate, then you've really succeeded, but at the very least try and force them into 2 pairs as opposed to 1 solid unit. If they're 1 solid unit holding a line, you're going to have a really tough game against Khemri. Same idea again, hold off, knock down the ball carrier every chance you get because it's hard for Khemri to pick up the ball, and Khemri is the team that you're most likely stealing from, so keep that in mind as well. Your main strategy is to knock down the ball and steal it from them. Oops. And lastly, Chaos Dwarves. Chaos Dwarves, again, are a bit of a difficult matchup, and again you want to avoid the fight as much as possible, staying away from the Chaos Dwarfs themselves. They can't move very far. The Bull Centaurs can though, and they are strong, so you are probably going to get blitzed every turn by a Bull Centaur. You can stab the Hobgoblins if you really want to, though blocking them is usually safer, so you're better off not bringing the Assassin to this fight. If a Witch Elf can get rid of any Hobgoblin from the sideline, or even a Bull Centaur himself, then that's fantastic. But most importantly, stay away from those little annoying dwarves. And that's it. That's the entire rundown of the races. So, thank you for watching this video. This of course is the first of the scheduled videos. I will be doing these weekly now. They're not going to be as regular as the videos used to be, so just keep that in mind. Every week there will be a new race. Obviously I film at different times, and if you do want to catch me filming, by the way, you can. It's a bit of a weird thing I set up, but it's possible. I actually put myself in a voice channel when I'm doing these videos, so you can actually listen and get a sneak peek if you really want to. Though you can't talk in these channels, of course, and I don't know you're there, so I'm never going to say hello to you, but if you do want to sit down and listen, you can on my Discord channel. My Discord channel is linked in my channel in general and below. Thank you all for watching, and if you are somebody who's interested in Dash, this is the team that I would recommend starting with, just to give you a bit of a flavour for the Dash play. Though just keep in mind that you're not really going to be passing too much with this team. Thank you all for watching, and next up of course we'll have Bretonnians, which is one of the weirdest teams, but we'll see what I do with that. Bye bye for now.